Hello and welcome to today's video. This video is going to be on the build that I personally used to get myself through honor mode in a way that mitigates pretty much all of the risks that might come up doing an honor run. Obviously, your biggest risks being that you can't reload the game if you make a mistake or something bad happens. So the build that I used here allowed me to start and finish the entire honor mode run in just over 9 hours. So if you want to get yourself a shiny achievement that, according to the Steam, only 1.5% of people have, and also this beautiful golden dice, then this is the build I would recommend. Once you understand the way that this build works, it's actually very simple. It requires no magic items at all, so it kind of leaves you free to select what magic items you want, though if you do it the way I did it, you'll be going so quickly you won't have time to collect magic items. So let me show you what this build can do at its maximum capacity. Okay, so I've put us into a little bit of combat here at the end of the game, just so I can show you exactly how much damage we have the capability of doing. We're going to do it as simply as is humanly possible. So we start off with water bottles. We're going to make sure we pick Cree here and have her throw a water bottle at our enemy. Once our enemy is wet, they have vulnerability to lightning and to cold. That is super important. Our enemy is wet. We take this, we do our highest level spell, which is a 6th level spell here. We hit Destructive Wrath, which is the one that maximizes our damage. And because we hit, we're going to do Luck of the Far Realms. And that's 288 damage in a single hit from a 6th level spell, albeit critical hit and wet for quadruple damage. So what we were looking at there, instead of it being 60-12 for the maximum, it's 60-12 times 2 for the critical hit for 12d12. Times 2 again for 24d12. You then just times 24 by 12 and you end up with 288 damage. This is an incredibly powerful build. Being able to do 288 damage in a single attack is more than most of our enemies are going to be able to deal with. We can do this with both Shadowheart here and Gale on a wet enemy. We can then take Potions of Speed, which would also give us access to another whole action in which we could do the exact same thing, albeit not necessarily with the critical hit and not being able to maximize our Channel Divinity, but we'll still be doing a lot of damage outside of that. At the lower levels, you're still looking at major amounts of damage compared to the enemies of your level. So even at first level, when we're using Chromatic Orb, for example, which does 2d8 of damage, it's actually doing 4d8 doubled into 8d8 of damage, which are going to max out for 64 damage, I believe, at first level, which will beat most of your enemy. At second level, you're looking something like 96 damage, I think it is. So this is an incredibly powerful build, and I'd recommend that anybody does it. Now, you'll probably find from time to time that you'll get yourself in a position like this where everyone's maybe bunched up and you're kind of in like an awkward or a wrong position. What I would do is I would take any of our characters, but specifically Cree, and I would just cast invisibility. Once you're invisible, you just run away. That's all you need to do. You can just get far enough away to flee combat, and as long as you have just one character that can flee, you can resurrect them back at Withers. It is a pretty small cost, and then you can just pickpocket him back to get the money back, and he doesn't seem to mind too much. So make sure you've always got at least a 2nd level spell available to you, so you can go invisible and you can run away at all times. That is something that I would highly recommend to make sure that you are protecting yourself at all times and able to get away where you need to. As long as one person can survive, everyone can survive. You can then take a long rest, have everyone resurrected, and then try the fight again. There's only 2 fights that you have to do that restrict you in your ability to leave a fight, and that's against Ketheric, down below the ground, and also the Astral Monks. And in those fights, we're really just going to be focusing on doing the major amount of damage that we are able to put down here with the lightning and the wetting. This can all be done without any magic items. It's a very simple thing once you get into it because it pretty much runs itself. You just click on the buttons when they come up. And in my opinion, it is by far the easiest and the safest way of running this. Okay, so when it comes to creating our main character, the one that you start from the title screen, we're going to be going with a halfling and we're going to be going bard. So the reason that we want to go halfling here is because we get the racial ability halfling luck. What that means is that if you rolled a 1 at any time, you didn't, which is obviously fantastic for mitigating all risks that might come up at any point. So that's why we're picking halfling here. We're picking bard because they have the best chances to succeed in conversation checks. Obviously, conversations during the game can get you access to areas. It can make fights end before they've even begun, And it's a great way to get extra XP without having to do a fight that could potentially get you killed at the end of the day. So again, because we're trying to mitigate risk, we're picking Halfling Bard as our main character here. When it comes to cantrips, we're going to want to take Vicious Mockery because it's a great one, and also Friends. Friends is a super useful spell, and again, we're going to be having a second Bard who follows this exact same routine, an exact same build, in the same way that our origin characters that are Cleric Wizard are going to be the exact same. Two of each character that are pretty much effectively identical is what we're going for here. So you can just follow the same thing with a couple of exceptions, but I will be getting into those. I'll make sure you know which ones those are. So here we're going to take Vicious Mockery and Friends. Now, bear in mind, Friends is a great spell to use if you know that you're going to be out of your enemy's location once you're done speaking, or they're going to maybe heal over. If you use this with allies, don't forget in the higher difficulties, which is to say this difficulty and also Tactician as well, your enemies, or rather the people that you've used this on, will probably become your enemies afterwards. So be sparing in your use of this unless you know you're not going to see them again. When it comes to spells, one thing I'd always take is Healing Word to pick somebody up if something goes really badly wrong. Thunderwave is really good for this build because knocking people off the edge of the map is going to kill them a lot faster than doing damage to them will. And believe it or not, Disguise Self is actually one of the ones that I would definitely recommend that we pick here. Now, the reason for this is that a lot of Act 1, especially the Goblin Camp, you can just use Disguise Self to make you look like a drow. If you look like a drow, all of the goblins will just let you pass for the most part without making you do a roll. Or if they make you do a roll, it'll be a really, really simple one. Drow is a fantastic thing to do, so once you've left the Emerald Grove and you're heading towards the Goblin Camp, make sure you disguise yourself as a drow. And when it comes to your stats, what I do is I bring Charisma down to 16. We don't really need 17, and we'll keep the points where we can. We'll bump up Strength to 10. We're going to drop down Intelligence all the way down to 8. We're going to pump up our Constitution to 16 for the extra HP, and our Dexterity to 14, so we have a decent initiative order. This is the way that I would have this. I'd also make it so that you're proficient in all of the different conversational abilities, so that way you have the best chances of succeeding in your conversations whenever they come up. Now, for level 2, we're going to take another spell. Again, it doesn't really matter what you pick at this point. Longstrider is always nice. Featherfall's fine as well. That's entirely up to you. And then we hit level 3. So at level 3, we get our first expertise. We're going to put them, in my opinion, the best way to do it is in Persuasion and Deception. That way you have access to quite a lot of the different roles that you're going to be talking to people about, but Performance and Intimidation are equally good roles as well. Now, the ones that you don't pick here, you're going to want to pick with your other Bard, which is going to be the Dwereguard that comes up later on, just so that you can have all avenues covered. And you can pick whatever else you want. It doesn't really matter too much. Now, for spells, you're definitely going to want to pick Invisibility the second that you get access to it. This is such a useful spell all throughout the game to be able to run straight past your enemies without having to deal with them. It is an incredibly useful spell. We're going to pick Invisibility on our main character here, but we're probably going to pick Knock on our other one at this equal 3rd level here. It doesn't matter too much because we're going to be able to pick both of them anyway, but we're going to need Knock later on, specifically on the Dweregar. When we get to where Balthazar is, we can use this on his door and make him do the fight while we sit invisible. It's very, very, very useful, and it skips out on a very difficult fight in front of the Night Song. So I would definitely recommend that you take Knock on your Dweregar instead. Now, in terms of subclass, we're picking Lore. Lore is just going to do really well for us cutting words to help make our enemies miss us, and it also gives us extra magical secrets, which we're going to be making good use of later on. Now, once we hit our level 4, we're going to be taking the Lucky Feat. Now, Lucky is going to give us 3 times per day advantage on checks that we want to do. This is really nice to be able to choose roles that you are going to be more likely to be successful on. However, this is the only character that's going to be taking the Lucky Feat. Every other character that we're building is going to be taking the Alert Feat. Our other cantrip, up to you, spells-wise. I would recommend picking the other one that we didn't. Hold Person is also always a good spell too. Now, at 5th level, we're going to get access to our 3rd level spells. What I'd pick here is Glyph of Warding, just because it does have a lightning option, which will let us do extra damage on our enemies once they're all wet, as far as our plan is. And at level 6, we get our first magical secrets. So we can pick another spell here from our regular Bard. I'd probably pick Shatter, because it's a nice AoE to have access to. When it comes to magical secrets here, what I would most certainly be picking is Lightning Bolt. That's going to let us do a lot of damage in line with our other characters. It won't be as much as everybody else does, but it's really nice to have for an extra pump of damage where we need it. And our other option here is probably Counterspell. However, on the other Bard, what I like to do because Counterspell doesn't need to come up too often here, I would actually replace it with Magic Missile. Magic Missile is super, super handy for later in the game when we're facing off against Auron. Being able to use this to get rid of the unstoppables that she has makes it way more simple, because this attacks in individualized darts, which each takes off a stack of unstoppable. So I'd recommend that you have Magic Missile on at least one of your 2 bards, and probably take it on your wizards as well, because it's just a really nice, useful spell. Okay, now we hit our 7th level and we pick whatever we want from here. It doesn't really matter too much. I'd probably pick Dimension Door because it's nice to have a traversal ability here. At level 8, and this is the highest level that I actually got in my playthrough of the Honor mode, and it took, like I said before, just over 9 hours to do. So after this point, it doesn't really matter what you pick. I'd probably pick Greater Invisibility here, and then ability score improvement to make sure that I'm doing a little bit better with charisma. But by this point, you probably don't have too much of the game left to play. Now, the reason that we're picking Bard for our other characters, specifically the Duergar, is because of Bardic Inspiration. Now, Bardic Inspiration makes it so that you can give your allies an extra d6 bonus to a roll. Attack rolls, sure. Saving throws, sure. But ability checks is really where we're interested. Now, regularly, up until I think it's something like level 12, bards cannot inspire themselves. However, a separate bard can inspire a different bard. So we have our second bard as backup to be able to give us bardic inspiration in our conversations, giving us a d6 all the way up through, I think it's like a d12 later in the game, to be able to roll on top of our regular rolls to make sure that we succeed. And that's also why we have guidance on our cleric wizards as well, so that they can give us more buffs. Having as many buffs as we can in the conversations give us the best chance of success. Now, when it comes to our hireling, we're going to be taking Derek the Duergar. Now, we're going to want to make this build exactly the same as our main character, except for one specific difference, and I'll show you exactly what that is. Make that 2 differences. One of them is going to be that we're going to pick the opposite for expertise than we picked for our main character. So the major difference, the second difference, but the major difference that we're making with Derek here is we're giving her the alert feat instead of the lucky feat. Alert's going to make it so that whenever we start combat, we're pretty much always going to be the top of the initiative order, meaning that none of our enemies are going to get to act for us. So once we've got combat actually started, we can then move all the rest of our characters who are still hiding into a good position and then get them into combat too, with the majority of the rest of them, again, besides our main character, having alert as well, so they'll get to act before everyone else as well. It's really, really, really helpful to be able to do that, because you can start combat off in the ideal conditions for yourself. That takes away so much of the RNG that can come with having your enemies go first, and will mitigate as much risk as possible, which is the name of the game when it comes to playing on Honor mode. Now, the reason that we're picking Duergar here as our 4th character is specifically for the invisibility cantrip. This is a thing that Duergar get access to, which makes it so that they can be invisible all the time without any duration. It drops in the same way that the regular invisibility spell does if you're casting any spells or attacking, but outside of that, it will be on forever. It is incredibly strong and incredibly useful for sneaking past anybody that you want to sneak past, and it's also great for getting your character into position before combat starts without worrying about them falling out of invisibility, and then you can cancel it as and when you please to start combat. This is why we're picking a Duergar. It's absolutely a wonderful and fantastic ability. Okay, so when it comes to our origin characters, we're going to be having Gale, absolutely 100%. You're going to need Gale, and then whoever else you want. I have Shadowheart here, but you could have a Star, you could have whoever you want, as long as you can convince them to accept tadpoles. Now, our first level, we're going to be making sure to pick Cleric as our class. Cantrips, do whatever you want. I would always make sure you take Guidance and Resistance, because it's just a little bit more convenient, and Sacred Flame, those are 3 pretty good Cleric cantrips. It doesn't matter too much, but we're going to pick those anyway. We're going to make sure we're picking the Tempest domain. So the great thing about Tempest is it actually gives you access to heavy armor, which is pretty rare for spellcasters, but it's the 2nd level ability that we want from this class. Now, when it comes to your ability split, we're actually going to dump Wisdom back down to 10, and we're going to pump up Intelligence, because our main spellcasting class here is actually going to be Wizard, which we're going to multi-class into in just a second. We're going to dump down Charisma, because we don't need that at all. We're going to pump our Constitution up to 16, Dexterity of 14, so we got extra health from Constitution, but decent initiative order for Dexterity, and a Strength of 10 to make jumps if we need to. That's going to be our level 1 when it comes to Shadowheart and also Gale. Now, at level 2, we're going to go and stay in Cleric here, and we are going to make sure that we get this for Destructive Wrath. Now, Destructive Wrath is, as you will have seen already, that is what lets us maximize our damage with thunder or lightning. So instead of rolling dice, say for example 4d12, we're doing 4 times 12 is our damage, and that's how it's going to work. So Destructive Wrath is really, really good, and that is a really important basis of this build. Now, for level 3 onwards, we're going to be going and multi-classing into Wizard. Now, a lot of people would probably go Sorcerer here for Storm Sorcerer, as that would make complete sense, and this build regularly people would. However, in this case, what we're going to be doing is Wizard, and that is because we're playing on Honor Mode. Now, obviously with Honor Mode, we can't save and load as we like. So if we make a mistake, it could end the run. Now, one of the great things about Wizard, and we'll get to it in a second, is going to be the Divination subclass. But as our first level, we're going to pick our cantrips. I personally would make sure that I have Ray of Frost and Shocking Grasp, because it's pretty convenient to have those. I take Firebolt as well. Now, Shadowheart's high half-elf, so she already gets that, but I would take Firebolt on Gale, for example, as well. In this instance, we're just going to take something like Friends. It doesn't matter too much because we're not really going to be using the cantrips. Now, when it comes to spell distribution with our Origin characters here, we're going to be going with Magic Missile. We're going to be going with Witch Bolt. We're going to take Thunder Wave, even though we already have it on the Cleric class, because our main stat is going to be Intelligence, not Wisdom. So we're going to make sure we pick our Thunder Wave or Wizard. You take something like Ice Knife as well for extra damage. Shield is great to avoid taking damage, and also Chromatic Orb. Chromatic Orb and Witch Bolt are going to be the 2 main spells that we're going to want to use for dealing maximized damage to our enemies. Now, at level 4 total, which is 2 Cleric and 2 Wizard, we're going to be taking the Divination Wizard subclass. The reason for this is the Portent dice. So, again, because we're playing on Honor Mode, we're going to want to make sure that we're mitigating all risk that we can. Portent makes it so that after a long rest, we're going to be waking up with 2 already predetermined dice rolls. So you can long rest over and over again until you get a natural 20 as one of those options. We're going to be able to use that so that if we ever miss an attack in combat, instead we can sort of be like, no, I think it's a crit instead. And it will just be a crit. So this is super, super useful to have. It's really, really handy to be able to go into combat and know that you have a critical hit stored up, so you can do your maximum damage on your first turn. It takes all of the guessing out of playing this character. And for our next spells as well, again, it doesn't really matter what you pick here, because we've already got all the ones we need. We're going to take like Featherfall and Enhanced Sleep, for example. Okay, and we level up again. We get our 2nd level spells. I would take probably Invisibility and Hold Person maybe on this character, and then maybe take Invisibility and Knock on the other one. But either way, we'll probably end up having these same spells selected between the 2 of them anyway. At our 4th level Wizard, we get another cantrip, pick whatever you want, and then take the other spell you didn't take. In this case, it would be Knock, and then also something else, whatever you feel like. We'll maybe take Shatter here because it's thunder damage, or we could take Misty Step so we can teleport away if we feel like things are getting risky. And as we said before, for the feat, we're picking Alert here, as we're going to do with everyone except for our main. At level 5 of Wizard, we're going to be taking some 3rd level spells. I would recommend Lightning Bolt here, really good, and it stacks well with what we've been doing. Counter spell's quite nice to take, as well as Fireball if you wanted to do damage from a little bit further away or bigger damage to an area. It doesn't really necessarily stack well with the build, but it's always nice to have other options. But in this case, we're going to pick Lightning Bolt and Counter spell. Okay, so now we've hit total level 8, 2 in Cleric, 6 in Wizard. And at this point, this is the final level that I actually got to in my entire run. From here on, it doesn't really matter what you pick. I'd still sort of trend towards the kind of lightning damage that we've been doing, just because that's the build. But bear in mind, if you're going outside of just doing the things that are required to finish the game, you may find certain enemies that are like resistant or immune to lightning damage. So do bear that in mind, but I think most fights in the game will be okay with the build we're doing. So I'd stick with Wizard here, I'd keep going up this way, but the rest of the levels beyond here, it really doesn't matter what you pick, because we're still using the same spells that we unlocked at level 1 for the most part anyway. Now, this is a different save from an early game that I've played. We want to be making sure that we get our Origin characters here to be willing to accept taking tadpoles. So you may have to make a roll to convince them of doing that. You're going to want to make sure that you have characters that you can do that on. Make sure that you get it on Gale. You need to make sure that you have Gale until the end of the game, and having him take these tadpoles is going to make life a lot easier. Do it as early as you get access to. And then for your other character, take whichever one will accept them for the most part. Again, I have Shadowheart here. I can convince her because I've got major bonuses, but even if you don't, the rolls aren't usually too hard, but I'd definitely make sure that you succeed on this. Gale may be even willing to take these right off the bat as well, which would be super useful. What we need is 2 tadpoles per wizard cleric, okay? We're going to take favorable beginnings because that gives us access to Luck of the Far Realms. Luck of the Far Realms is going to do the opposite thing to what our Portent Dice does. So, as I said before, Portent's going to make it so that we have access to, if we're going to fail an attack roll, we get to then just choose for it to be a critical hit instead. Luck of the Far Realms will make it so that if we do hit the attack, we can make it into a crit instead. So no matter what happens, our attack will always be a crit on the first attack. That is going to be incredibly helpful for the way that we're planning on playing this, because it will be how we maximize our damage with consistency and certainty. Okay, so that wraps up, I think, pretty much everything that we could have covered for this build. Now, if you made it this far in the video, I really do appreciate it. I hope you found something valuable out of this. I hope it helps you play honor mode and get all the way through it if possible. If you do, please be sure to leave a comment or let me know in some way. I'd really like to know how it works for everyone else. I firmly believe that this really is probably the best build to do this, just because it gives you so much power so early in the game, and it really lets you cover all bases. Now, I will be uploading a separate video that shows kind of most of the route that I took as well, so be on the lookout for that if you kind of want to follow along the rough idea of how that goes. But yeah, again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll hopefully catch you in the next one. Thanks so much. Bye, guys.